Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, for the first time ever in the history of the NHS, consultants and junior doctors in England, they've walked out together, united in strike. Should pay demands ever be prioritised like this over patient care? Your thoughts? And in this country, we've got the tried and tested concept of policing by consent. But with multiple forces now in special measures and over 1,000 officers in our biggest police force either suspended or restricted in their duties, I'm asking you, do you still consent to being policed the way we are? And a crucial and unprecedented legal fight began today between the Scottish Government and Westminster. The stakes, let me tell you, are high. It centres ultimately around the fact of whether or not a 16-year-old should be legally able to change their gender and how easy that should be. So, your thoughts? And don't shoot the messenger. I can hear you now. I do like to debate things, so I'm wondering, when it comes to the mess of property in this country and who can afford it, capital gains tax on our primary residences, our homes, should we have to pay tax or not? All of that to come and more, but first, let's grab tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening. Well, the top story this evening is that the head of Channel 4 Television says there's no evidence to suggest its management were told of serious allegations concerning Russell Brand. That comes after the BBC announced a review of the comedian's time at the corporation. And the Metropolitan Police yesterday confirmed it had received a report of an alleged assault due to have taken place in 2003. 4 other allegations of rape or sexual assault were published as part of a joint investigation by the Sunday Times and Channel 4. Mr. Brand denies all allegations. Now, emergency measures are being put in place and commissioners will be appointed to take over the day-to-day running of Birmingham City Council. There'll also be a local inquiry into the authority after it was declared effectively bankrupt. It's now facing a growing equal pay liability of around £1 billion and an £87 million financial gap. The community's Secretary Michael Gove says today's action is aimed at protecting the interests of residents. The Home Office is paying around £8 million a day for asylum seekers to be put up in hotels, according to new figures. The department's annual report says small boat arrivals across the Channel are placing an unsustainable pressure on our asylum system and costing more than £3 billion a year. Labour says the cost of hotel accommodation has gone up by a third since Rishi Sunak promised to end hotel use. Downing Street says the BMA's members could step back from industrial action this week. That's as rules ensuring a minimum level of cover in hospitals could be extended. Under the government's proposal, doctors and nurses would be required to maintain necessary and safe levels of service. Consultants in England are striking for 48 hours today over pay, with junior doctors joining them tomorrow and picketing until Friday. Well, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, told GB News earlier minimum service levels protect patients.
How do we get the balance right? How do we protect those time-critical services? We've got primary legislation now in place, and we're going to look at how that applies in hospitals so that we can ensure things like chemotherapy are not disrupted by strikes and really make sure we're protecting patients. So that's what we're consulting on. We want to get that balance right. It is important, people's right to strike, and we respect that.
The government's facing criticism for its decision to give Avanti West Coast a new long-term contract. The Department for Transport has announced the train operator will continue to run services on the West Coast main line for at least 3 years. That line runs from London to Glasgow through Birmingham, Liverpool and Manchester and Edinburgh as well. And that's despite the company having the second worst performance records in the country on the railways. Weaver Vale MP Mike Ainsbury said the decision is nonsense.
It seems that this contract has been rewarded on the basis that it's a little less crap than it used to be. Is that really the way to make a decision in government? It's appalling. This is ideologically, dogmatically driven. It's nonsense.
The number of schools in England where crumble-prone concrete has been found has risen to 174. It's after hundreds of surveys have been carried out in schools across England to determine the extent of the problem. A number of schools were forced to fully or partially close just days before the start of term. Nearly 250 temporary classrooms were put on order to cope with the crisis, but the Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says it's a shambles. Now, the Financial Conduct Authority has concluded there's no evidence that banks close the accounts of customers because of their political views. It follows the closure of Nigel Farage's account by Coutts. A Freedom of Information request by the GB News presenter revealed that internal memos at the bank deemed his views inconsistent with its position as an inclusive organisation. The Telegraph says his account wasn't included in the FCA's report. Mr Farage has branded the outcome of the review a joke.
This is a farce, and frankly, it shows me something. The people at the top of the FCA are deeply political themselves. Think of Sheldon Mills, the executive director, he of Stonewall, he of endless political campaigns on gender and much else. And when you ask a group of biased people to examine bias, don't be surprised when they don't find anything.
Sir Keir Starmer is in Paris discussing post-Brexit relations with the French President, Emmanuel Macron. The Labour leader says he wants to secure a much better deal for the UK by reassessing trading ties with the bloc. The current trade deal, signed by Boris Johnson, faces its first 5-year review in 2025. Sir Keir says the UK's relationship with France is important on a national security level. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock alongside with the former Conservative MEP and life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, and the contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker. Good evening to both of you. Oh, you're sitting very far away from me today.
I think
let's get a train ticket to come and see you, I think, during this programme. You know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs Co? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? Graham says, Michelle, have you been ordained since we last saw you? And Mitchell is asking why I've come to work dressed as the Cardinal tonight. I don't know what to say. Fashion, darlings, fashion. Anyway, what's coming up tonight? I want to talk to you about the massive, I would say, it's really crucial legal battle that started today between Scotland, Westminster, all about this gender reform situation, whether or not 16-year-olds should easily be able to change their gender. Crucial topic, if you ask me. Also, flirting an idea. Don't get all offended. Don't start getting in touch saying, who do I think I am, and all the rest of it. But looking for solutions to what is going on with the housing situation in this country. Capital gains tax. Do you think think our homes, our primary residences should be exempt from it or not? Get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at GBNews. But let's kick off tonight with a double doctor strike. Yes, consultants and junior doctors in England are staging their first ever joint strike. This is the first joint strike of this kind in the history of the NHS. This strike, as you might be familiar with by now, will last 2 days. The one by the junior doctors is scheduled about for 3. Now, Jacqueline, lots of people on the side of the doctors, consultants and all the rest of it saying pay them what they're worth. The other side of this argument is, hang on just a nanosecond, coordinated strikes and all the rest of it. We've got waiting lists as long as our arms as it stands. Where are you on it all?
Well, I think this has gone beyond just what you would hear as a normal negotiation. I mean, the fact the BMA, I mean, an organisation that is supposedly representing these professionals, puts in a pay claim for 35%, which is ludicrous, and then tries to say it's worked it out on retrospective increases in over a number of years. Is beyond me as a former trade union negotiator. I certainly, we went for good deals, but I mean, this is nonsense. The fact now that this is really about. It's just an anti-Tory thing. This is having a go at the government. And I have friends who are in the medical profession, and they are excellent. We've got some great doctors, we've got some great nurses, we've got some great staff. But at the end of the day, you go into medicine, and you are there your primary purpose is to look after your patient. So I fully support having, what we're trying to do is to get a sort of a minimum standards, if people are looking at industrial disputes, minimum standards in place, which they have across Europe and across the world. But this sort of calling action like this, and also with the junior doctors. We have more than 7 million people on waiting lists. Their argument is, oh, this is about patient safety. We've got people on these waiting lists and they're dying. They're dying, and as soon as you actually have action, then of course what you're doing is you're adding to this waiting list, because they're then going to not being able to operate or not being able to see the patients. It's dreadful.
So is this an out-of-control union that's bashing the Tories at the expense of patient safety, Michael?
No, I'm also interested in this idea that they're supposedly representing the workers. I mean, there have been overwhelming votes in favour of these strikes, and I think that is not particularly mysterious why that's happened. Pay has been cut by 17% since 2010. Now, if you cut a profession's pay by 17%, you can't really expect them to just take that lying down. And I really don't envy the position that doctors find themselves in, because, if I were to go on strike, what would happen? My YouTube show would be down for 2 days. I wouldn't have to have too much of a moral dilemma about it. But if your job is to save the lives of patients, then yes, you are in a really difficult situation. Do you stand up for your rights and to resist a very significant pay cut over a long period of time, or do you go into work? And I don't envy that. And I suppose the compromise they've come out with is there will be a minimum service, so it's going to be Christmas Day cover, is what they're calling it. So it'll be like on Christmas Day. So hold on, everyone. If you are about to have a heart attack or potentially die, do try and hold off, won't you, for, the kind of service that you get on Christmas Day. And if anyone's had the misfortune of going to hospitals, I was in hospital for a month, and in that period we had things like weekends, never mind Christmas Day and bank holidays. I remember weekends. The kind of cover and the kind of access to the consultants that you needed during a weekend was completely reduced. Yeah, well, I don't think anyone's going to deny this isn't going to impact patients. I suppose what doctors would say is that what has been impacting patients for the past, 12 years now, is underfunding of the NHS, and especially since the COVID crisis, whereby we all went out and we all clapped for these people and said, I really think that was a bit of an implicit sort of pledge to say, we will value you what you are worth after this. While we're locked in our homes, you are going out there, basically to a war zone, which is our hospitals, and don't worry, we will reward you afterwards. Instead, what have we said? Actually, you need to accept pay cuts, you're greedy, shut up, stop taking strike, you're the people endangering patients. It seems a little bit disrespectful to me. I don't think that's the attitude at all that's been taken. We take a realistic attitude. You also have to look at some of the problems in the NHS. We've just had one of the worst cases on child killing, baby murdering, that we've had in history in this country. My own mother, and going back 20 years, died of negligence. Now, in the round, the amount of money they have to have in the budget because they're looking at medical negligence, and this isn't just recent. So, this whole NHS needs to be, in my view, needs absolutely
absolutely reforming. So, you know, we have the police. When you're working on the front line, we have the police, we have the armed forces. We expect them to be there 24/7. And it's laughable when they say, you know, well, we can have Christmas Day cover. Christmas Day cover? I think Michelle's absolutely spot on, because now you've got people, a lot of doctors who've wanted to go in and work, and then the hospital actually, or the union, is saying to them, oh, don't tell them though what day you're going to come in, because what they're doing is they're trying to go in, then find the list has been scrubbed for their surgery, and that's a fact. So this isn't just straightforward. This isn't just about terms and conditions. This is much wider, and they're going to do the same on the first week in October, apparently. Anyway,
would you support that? Where's the end point for you? Do you support, like, guys, do you know what, you can all tag team, you can all go on your joint strikes for as long as it takes until you get your 35% pay restoration?
Well, I don't think anyone is suggesting that, right? So I think it's pretty clear that the 35% demand was an opening offer, right? I know for the consultants, they've said all they want is not a real terms pay cut. So at the moment, they're being offered 6%. Inflation is currently 6.8%. So after a 17% pay cut over 12 years, after working like dogs throughout the COVID crisis, they are being asked to accept another pay cut. And you can see why that is deemed offensive by people who are working incredibly hard to save lives. As I say, I don't think this is an easy decision, for them to make, which is why I really don't envy them. I think they're in an impossible situation.
So you would support them keeping going and keeping going, keeping going?
Well, I would support the government going back into the negotiating room. I don't think Steve Barclay has spoken to these people for 100 days.
But if that's the government's positions, the government said, right, do you know what, we've come up with a position that's fair and all the rest of it, that's our final offer.
But they don't think it is fair, right? So, I mean, that's the whole disagreement. Why is it the government that get to say, sorry, negotiations are over, this is our final offer? If the doctors haven't accepted that, then the government are going to have to come back into the negotiating room, aren't they?
The government have a responsibility to look after the public purse. It's the taxpayer. Where do they think 35% is going to come from? It's going to be coming from the NHS budget. It can't come from somewhere else.
Gordon says, why should doctors get a bigger percent pay increase than nurses?
Ludicrous.
Yeah, so the nurses issue is very interesting. Now, I know a number of nurses, and I think that was actually quite unfortunate the way that unfolded. And the reason I say that is because lots of nurses are very, very upset that that offer was accepted in the end. Basically, there was a division between the various nursing unions, and the Royal College of Nurses did reject the offer, but a number of other unions accepted it. Now, you could say, from the government's perspective, that's a victory. OK, you've defeated the workforce, they've accepted this pay rise. I think the idea that we are celebrating the demoralisation of our nurses is somewhat...
That's not what Gordon asked. Gordon was just asking, why should they be entitled to more of a percentage increase than the nurses, bearing in mind will already out-earn these nurses by a country mile?
Well, I think the nurses should have got a lot more. And I think it's difficult to say that because one nurse union accepted this, the doctors have to accept what they don't want.
One of my other viewers, he says, I'll put this one to you, Jacqueline, if you don't allow doctors to keep striking to get what they want, then fair enough, but you're just going to force down their pay in a global marketplace for doctors. All that will happen, Michelle, is in a few years or so, people will just leave the NHS and move abroad.
Well, you've also got to look at the cost of training. While medical students do pay a proportion, we also, as the taxpayer, recognising the length of a degree, try and make sure that is funded for them, because it's actually quite difficult and quite expensive. So it doesn't work like that. We have chosen to have a National Health Service. It's one of the only ones in the entire world, because if you're looking at the continent, Australia and many other places, 95% of that pie will be private insurance, and then they will have a sort of a mini NHS of about 5%.
And last viewer point, lots of my viewers are saying, surely these people go into professions to save lives, not to earn top dollar. David is basically saying, isn't this convenient for some doctors, all this striking, because it presents them with the opportunity to top up their work in the private sector and earn top dollar?
I'm not sure if that is the case or if that is happening. I mean, my sister's a doctor. She's definitely not doing that.
What field is she in?
You what, sorry?
What field is she in?
She works with adults with learning difficulties.
So she wouldn't necessarily have a private practice, or maybe she would have consultations?
I mean, she doesn't do any private work. Actually, she's currently on maternity leave because she's had a new baby.
There is also an element, many can do some private work too, which I don't criticise, by the way.
Well, do you know what? It's a conversation that certainly divides people. You know, whichever side of the fence that you're on, surely we all do actually want these people to be there, to be focused, to be motivated and giving us the best care possible. But how do we achieve that? That is the point, I think, that will rumble on on and on. After the break, I want to talk to you about policing. In this country, we have a very simple concept, police by consent. I'm asking you, with the state of many things in the police situation, special measures here, people being off suspended there for bad behaviour, do you still consent to being policed the way we are?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, I've got the former Conservative MEP and Life Peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, and the contributing editor at Novara Media, Michael Walker. Matthew has just tweeted me saying, please, can you move Jacqueline's pearls? They're banging on a microphone. We listen to you. Thank you for flagging that. We've sorted out our pearls and we shall now move on. Lots of you getting in touch about that situation, about the strikes. Tony, we were debating whether or not it's perhaps political. Tony says, how come then the doctors in Scotland accepted the offer? How come it's fair there and acceptable there, but it's not here? Keith has been in touch and said, Michelle, I am a consultant and I have to say I deplore these strikes and I have made my feeling known among his workplace. He said, your guest who states a 17% cut is speaking tosh. He's talking to you. He said he is using the height rate of inflationary year. As for pay cuts, I am ashamed to say I know consultants who do want the strikes to continue so that they can make the most of their private practices.
I'm not sure. It's the Consumer Price Index of inflation from 2010. So that was in the BBC article. I'm not sure
Well, there you go,
what
Keith.
figure he thinks
Keith says you're
I'm
speaking
using.
tosh. He's a consultant. Michael says
He
it's
might not be a
not.
statistician.
No, we never negotiated like that, though.
Well, I know. I mean, I do think we pull these kind of...
rabbits out of the hat.
Yeah, like unique kind of... We pick the best case months and days and years and all the rest of it sometimes to make statistics meet our arguments, perhaps some people might suggest. Anyway, do you know what? As I said, that one will rumble on and on. But respect to you, Keith, because sometimes it is easy to think that everyone is supporting one side or another. Of course, as a consultant yourself, it's interesting to know that that feeling is certainly not among your colleagues always the case. Let's talk policing, though, shall we? Because the Met Police is, of course, our country's biggest force. They've got 1,000 officers currently are either suspended or what they call on restricted duties. In the past 2 years as well, there's been 6 police forces that have been put into special measures. This whole kind of in this country, this notion, we have a respectful policing by consent principle. It only really works if everyone buys into it. And I'm starting to wonder, you know, you've got conviction rates going down the pan. You can't get a call out or people taking you seriously if you've been burgled or whatever. Special measures here, there and everywhere. Police officers suspended, some of them for doing absolutely horrendous things. And we know some of the cases as well where they've not just been suspended, they've been sent to prison. Do you think in this country, do you, for example, still consent to policing in the way it's being done?
Well, I think what's interesting, you know, about that is it really does depend who you are. So we're talking now about how the police are losing consent among the general population. I mean, there are sections of the population who, you know, they haven't had consent for a very long time. So Britain's black communities, working class, people in care, for example, have had a terrible time going to the police when it comes to sexual assault and the like. So there are many people who for a long time haven't had confidence in the police, and now it is becoming generalised. And I think that is because we are realising the extent of the rot. Now, you said there 1,000 people currently suspended from their usual duties because they're under investigation. That's 1 in 34 officers in the Metropolitan Police. And what I find even more shocking, 450 of those, that's for sexual offences and domestic violence. So obviously, there is a lot of scrutiny on the Metropolitan Police for institutional misogyny because of the 2 horrific cases of David Carrick and Wayne Couzens. And what this is suggesting is that this is a really widespread problem.
And you know, my heart goes out to people because domestic violence in itself, you know, at the best of times, absolutely horrendous. But if your husband is the one perpetrating this and then he is a police officer, I mean, you must feel absolutely lost and hopeless because if he's the people that you're supposed to turn to, I mean, goodness gracious me. But on the more broader point of policing by consent, where are you?
Well, obviously, I want to carry on policing by consent. I mean, we've got to look, we've got some bad apples here in a barrel, and the vast majority...
There's a lot of bad apples. 1 in 34.
We look at tens of thousands of police. The vast majority of the police are excellent. They're the first people that when we dial 999, whatever the circumstances, we hope that they're going to turn up, and they do. But clearly there is an issue here. It's not just the Met. I think it's also we've had issues with Greater Manchester Police and others. And I think we've got to just take a wider view on here, because it seems to me also when you're looking at recruitment, and, you know, the question is, I was actually talking to a couple of Met officers today because I thought I'd ask them myself. Some had been, you know, one had been in for a long time and he'd trained originally at Hendon. And, of course, Hendon was the sort of the great training school where our police officers came out. And that's sort of gone by the by over the last years. In addition, I think they've clearly, when they were trying to bring a lot more police officers in, I don't think that they were doing due diligence on a number of these people. I mean, they have even found that they've had people who've had a criminal record down the line. But the other point is the time it's taken when people are suspended, whether it's gross negligence or whatever it may be, to actually process this. We've got officers who are at home for 2 years. Now, they may not be guilty at the end of it, but this isn't acceptable. And another point I'd just like to raise is, why is there no encouragement anymore, and it hasn't happened for more than 20 years, of people who are ex-military going into the police force? It was the ex-military that pretty well ran the prisons post-war. Many of the police force, and these were fit people, they'd been in very difficult circumstances, can deal with difficult things. I mean, they seem to have been not looked at them at all over the last years, and I'm not sure whether that's been some sort of policy.
Well, get in touch with me. Are you,
so there we are.
Are you ex-military? Have you ever considered going into the police? Because Jacqueline's point is quite a good one. I'm sure there's quite a good fit there. I don't know. Have you tried? Have you been rejected? Would that be your thing or not? Lots of people getting in touch about this topic, and I have to say that yet again you do have very different opinions, because I feel sorry for people that are serving police officers, that are good, decent ones. So I don't feel sorry for the bad apples, obviously, but the good, decent ones, because you put your life on the line. You know, if you work in emergency response, you get a 999 call, goodness only knows what you can be met with at the end of it. You've probably got families of your own at home. You know, your mums must be worried sick about every time you leave for work, you're ever going to come home again, all the rest of it. So these people are real kind of heroes, heroic work and all the rest of it. Brian says 99.9% of our police are good people. For goodness sake, will you all stop doing them down? How do you maintain morale when there is this attitude of people undermining the police often?
Well, I suppose just as I was saying when we were talking about doctors, they're in a position I don't envy, right? They're doing an incredibly difficult job. When it comes to doctors, they're accepting pay cuts. When it comes to the police, they're going home and seeing all of these awful headlines. Now, I suppose going back to statistics, someone said 99.9% of them are good people. Now, when it comes to the Metropolitan Police, 1 in 34 of them seem to be under investigation for some kind of offence. So it does seem to be more than 0.1% of people who have a problem. The other thing I think we really need to be concerned about. So I was speaking to a lady recently who had joined the police, sort of served for a couple of years and then ended up leaving because she was so shocked by the levels of misogyny and racism. And the problem there is you can have a sort of self-reinforcing situation where good people who want to join the police are so outraged at what they see that they leave. So it's easier to remain in the police if you're a wrong-un. Now, that's not to say the majority are wrong-uns, but there is something seriously going wrong here.
Phil has been in touch and says, I am a retired chief inspector / DCI. And he says that I am appalled at the way that many things have gone. He says there's massively work policies now. He says things like police are not involved in the recruiting process anymore. He says that you've had police training centres closed down. And he says as well, very few officers now actually want to go out and patrol the streets. Angela, she says, the thing that's going wrong is all these targets. If we take all the targets out of policing, we might just get our police force back to actually just cracking on and policing people. Ken says, I've always supported the police in spite of much bad publicity. What you're saying is you think the main problem is that the police stations are not open 24 hours a day, all of them, and that many of them are getting closed down. He says it would be nice to see more officers walking the beat so you can actually get to know your local police officer. I remember, actually, the last time I saw a police officer around my parts. Can you? You tell me. Anyway, if you do want to be patrolling the beat, if you want to be wandering the streets, you need nice weather. Let's see whether or not you're going to get it.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkill and welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. We do have some further wet and perhaps thundery weather on the way with some strong winds too. The isobars are very tightly packed at the moment, which just illustrates that it is so blustery, so windy at the moment, and low pressure arriving, bringing some further wet weather to many parts as well. As we go through the end of today and overnight, we are going to have some heavy bursts of rain, particularly across parts of Scotland. There is a warning in force here, and also some further heavy rain for parts of Western England and Wales, also a warning in force here. Temperatures for many, well, it is going to be a mild start on Wednesday morning, though it may not feel it because of the unsettled weather. A band of rain then is going to push its way eastwards across parts of England and Wales in particular, with some heavy bursts as we go through the day, reaching parts of the southeast into the afternoon. Some brighter skies across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also a feed of showers coming in, and some of these could be heavy and thundery. Temperatures should just about get to highs of around 20 Celsius in the southeast, but in the wind and the rain, it's not going to feel as warm as that. That rain will eventually clear through as we go through Wednesday night into Thursday, so a brighter start for many places on Thursday. But again, we are going to see plenty of showers and also some heavy showery rain feeding into western parts of Scotland in particular, with the risk of some thunder. There will be some further unsettled weather through the end of the week, but perhaps something a bit drier to start Saturday.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Jane's been in touch saying, my husband was ex-military. He did join the police, but he left very quickly, having seen how it was run. There you go. Simon said, the thing is, Michelle, this is not just the police. There's no respect anymore for authority figures right across society. He goes on to say that he is fed up of feeling like he's paying much higher taxes for much lower standard of service, pretty much absolutely every sector that you try and get a hold of these days. Jim says, Dewberry, please, will you wind your neck in? He's talking about, well, he could be talking about anything, quite frankly, but he's talking about one of the topics that I want to get to before the end of the programme. Just a conversation, just a debate, looking at how to potentially fix the housing situation in this country. Capital gains tax, your home is exempt from it, but many people are making absolute fortunes on their own property. Should we have to pay capital gains tax or not? Jim's having not any of it and tells me to pack it in, desperately trying to get people to pay more tax. It's all a debate, Jim. Stick with me. I'll see you in 2.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me, Baroness Jacqueline Foster and Michael Walker Remain. June, my viewer, has been in touch saying, Michelle, get a life. I must say, I'm very disappointed in you. What is she talking about? You might be wondering if you just tuned in. She's talking about a debate that I'm going to have before the end of the programme about capital gains tax on your home. You're livid tonight. You know what? It's just a debate. We're just throwing it out there. That's what we do. Tell me if you agree with that proposal or not. Lots of you getting in touch about that suggestion about ex-military people going into the police force. Many of you have been in touch to say, Michelle, the problem is that these days you need a degree to be a police officer. And lots of people have been in touch to say you've left the military, but you don't have a degree. So apparently the police don't want to touch you. If that's right, what a shame. I would say what a mistake, quite frankly. Anyway, look, there's a very pressing matter, I think, in society, a very important one, certainly to me as a mum, to many of you as parents, grandparents, whatever. And it's all about the issue of gender. Now, the Gender Recognition Reform Bill is a big day today, right, because it's a big legal battle has commenced, if you like, between Scotland's government and Westminster. You might remember that they'd gone through the process over in Scotland about kind of tweaking the Gender Reform Bill, and they got it all the way through. They was about to try and grant it royal assent, and Westminster swooped in, and for the first time, actually, I think perhaps since devolution, Westminster issued what they call a Section 35, basically to stop it. There was a harsh reaction to that. Let's just have a little listen, remind ourselves of the Scottish Social Justice Secretary, what she had to say about that.
The Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which was passed with an overwhelming majority from proceeding to royal assent, is a dark day for trans rights and a dark day for democracy.
Well, there you go, dark day for trans rights, dark day for democracy. 16-year-olds being able to very easily say that they are now a different gender and that being legally respected. Where are you on that?
Well, it's a dark day for child abuse in my view. Children at 16, you wait to get married when you're 18. You can join the military or go on the front line at 18. 18 is the sort of age that is generally accepted when we look across the piece in the United Kingdom. One of the other issues here, it wasn't just about the fact that they were dropping this as low as 16 and perhaps lower than that, is that children that did wish to change gender and maybe go on a path to transition or whatever, could not notify their parents. The parents need not necessarily have known. They need not necessarily have had any sort of treatment at all from, medics. We know for a fact about 90% of these young people will have issues with mental health issues. Yeah. So this is a really complex issue. I think what was a huge concern is the fact that the UK government had to step in here to not allow this to go into statute because it was then conflicting with what we do in England, Wales and everywhere else, was the right thing to do.
So just to recap then, so they were toing and froing in Scotland about some of this nuance and all the rest of it. It took them about 5 years to reach a point where they was ready to vote on it. When they voted in Scotland, they basically voted 86, was the majority, 86 votes to 39 against, basically. Now, just if you're not familiar with this, you might think, what is this all about? Well, what they wanted to try and to achieve, they wanted to remove the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria in order to help you on your way with a gender recognition certificate. So you're going to remove the medicalisation of this, lower the minimum wage to 16. Now, all you had to do, basically, was live in your acquired gender. It was up to, 3 months. In some cases, you have to just live as that gender. It's 6 months if you're 16 and 17. I'm really concerned about this stuff, Michael. Are you or not?
I think there are often arguments on both sides with these issues, but I do think, some of these reactions seem a little bit out of proportion to me. The idea that this is child abuse, right? So what would gender reform mean? Right? Now, I've been looking up what do these gender reform certificates get you. Now, all that they change is your birth certificate, which changes your marriage certificate and which changes your death certificate. Now, that's all it changes. So it is people who want to get married and want to have on their form their acquired gender instead of the gender that they were born into. Now, it doesn't seem to me that that causes much of a threat to them or anyone else.
That's the legal technicalities, isn't it? There's a lot more to it than that.
But what's up for debate here is the legal technicalities. And I think it is very important to separate the different concerns people might have. So this gender recognition... So, for example, I think it's perfectly legitimate for people to have concerns about prisons or elite sports. But this gender recognition certificate has nothing to do with those things.
Jacqueline?
You look at young kids, 1 minute they want to be Rocket Man and the next thing they want to, dance around in a ballerina dress. Human nature and puberty is difficult most of the time. And the trouble is now, what we have is, where children went through all sorts of emotions and hormonal changes through their teenage years, and people didn't overreact about it. They didn't try and park them in some sort of box somewhere. They allowed them to come out at the end of that, and you would probably find by the time they got to their late teens and 20s, some children may be gay, the majority would probably be heterosexual, and no fuss was made about it. The push where the fear is here, and this is where I'm coming into child abuse, is there is a push now. So if the child is maybe leaning towards a particular way to dress or to describe themselves, well, they're clearly, this is the argument, or they're clearly looking at they're going to go into transition. Now, transition means, as we know, this could be a lifetime on drugs. This could be the most awful surgery that they have to sustain, which affects them for the rest of their life. And to then start bringing down this age to, oh, we can swap your gender, you know, maybe 3 months at 16, whatever. It's outrageous, frankly. Is that outrageous?
Well, again, I think we're conflating lots of issues, and I think when you've got a sort of sensitive topic that can get lots of people quite upset, which this issue does, you know, understandably, it's important that we talk about what we're supposed to actually be talking about, right? So this reform doesn't have anything to... So it seems like you're talking more about the debate about puberty blockers, for example, and whether or not...
I'm talking about what this means.
Well, but all of those things that you're concerned about, this doesn't mean that. So all this would mean is that someone would change their name on their...
It facilitates this.
But how does it facilitate that? So how does someone facilitating a change to their marriage certificate mean that young kids will get puberty blockers?
We can drop the age to 16. You can then change your gender, and then that... But only for 3 months, because that's fine. This is ludicrous. This is a very serious issue. This is about child protection. It's about child safeguarding. And just as a point of information, 18 groups, pressure groups, advised the Scottish Government on this. 16 of them were pro this particular position, very, very vocal. And trans activists who can really be very difficult at times, particularly with the misogyny when it comes to the way they treat women, calling us TERFs and all of this sort of stuff. So we don't need any lectures on what we know has been going on to lead to this. But this isn't just as simple as you're making it out. The consequences of this is a slippery slope. And we're already on a slippery slope in schools and the NHS and all sorts of other things over these issues.
Very brief final words.
Yeah, so I think I'm just aware of the fact that I'm the man on the panel, and I want to make clear that actually when they poll people, it is women who are more in favour of trans reform than men. So
no, they're not.
It can be somewhat misleading. Well, that's what the polls show.
I
don't know what poll that was.
Poll these days, because I've never been asked about anything like this. I don't know anyone that has at all.
They only poll 1,000 people out of a population of...
You know, I've been a politician for all of these years. I'm talking to people all the time. All the time. I'm not relying on a poll of 1,600
That's still not the scientific method,
people.
Is it?
Oh, I talk to all sorts of people. Trust me.
Well, do you know what? I've got a sneaky suspicion we're not going to resolve this one on this programme tonight, so I'll let you have the final thoughts on that. Why do we need to do this? 16 years? You can't get a tattoo at 16. You can't even mark your body with something that you can get rid of down the line when you're 16. So why this stuff? I don't know. I'll leave it to you to ponder. What's your thoughts on it all? gbviews@gbnews.com. Yes, I want to talk about that issue when I come back from the break. Your home, our homes, should they be exempt from capital gains tax? You tell me.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me, Baroness Jacqueline Foster and Michael Walker. Lots of you, as you probably would expect, getting in touch about that last topic, about gender and changing your gender, particularly whether or not you should be able to do that age 16 years old. Goodness me. Someone said, Michelle, look, I can't give you my name because I could potentially lose my job. She says, work in the NHS, and today, and she says, most other days we have people ringing 111. She said she dealt with a call today, a male experiencing pregnancy problems. She flags up that actually these changing of the gender, it can cause confusion in various healthcare settings. I've got to say, maybe this is my ignorance, if indeed you do want to change to a man, why would you then want to keep the most female part of you, which is the ability to get pregnant? The mind boggles. Anyway, someone else has just been in touch saying, Michelle, what about the protections for autistic children? I have an autistic trans son who is now being given drugs despite never even having lived in her new gender. This person doesn't want to be named, said that the parent they live with has not been involved in some of this. And they say, my trans son has obsessions, as all autistic kids do. Where is the protection for these children? I shall leave you to ponder that one. Well, this is the topic that all of you have been in touch with tonight, telling me to get a life, shut up, and all the rest of it. It's just a simple pondering. The situation when it comes to housing in this country is split, isn't it? If you've got property, then brilliant, good for you. Yes, I know everybody's worked hard, they've made their money and they've earned their property. Don't resent anyone that for a second. When it comes, though, to looking at how do you level things up, how do you get people onto the housing market? Yes, we need more stock, but one of the absolute issues in all of this is the rate at which property has been increasing. So people that bought their property a while ago, most of them have made money, particularly in some of the bigger towns and cities. Capital gains tax is exempt when it's your primary residence, your home. Should it be? Do you think you should be taxed on that gain?
Absolutely not. I think a second home, I think, is fair cop. Certainly not. Because the thing is, you will very often find, OK, there may be people in my sort of age group or older than you, and, you know, we started off with a little flat, and then people maybe want a family. So they're hoping, in any event, if they've got on the housing ladder, that they've got a bit of a profit there. They might have invested money doing up their home, their little home, and then they think, OK, we want to expand our family or whatever, and they will use then that profit where they sell their house or their flat to be able to then live in a bigger premises, and that frees up the small one for the next one on the house.
The property that they're then buying, their next property up, that has increased in value as well.
Yeah.
So now they're having to spend more of their hard-earned cash to buy that second bigger house because everyone's hiking their prices up and market forces and all the rest of it. If they were taxed, perhaps,
the prices might not raise so rapidly.
Yeah, but you can't book the markets at the end of the day. And if you start running around price fixing, I mean, homeowners are taxpayers in any event, and you're paying council tax, you're paying all sorts of taxes on your home. And you know what we do want is to make sure everybody has a home to live in.
So it's an absolute no from Jacqueline.
Absolutely
she was not
not
on the fence. Michael.
Well, so, I mean, I think that model that you have of home ownership might be a little bit outdated, you know, because you're suggesting you get this flat, then you use your earnings from that flat to buy a bigger house. Now, the problem at the moment is no one can get that first flat. It's very, very difficult to get on the property ladder. In London, for example, you need an £150,000 deposit.
It depends where you live.
Yeah, but in all parts of the country, it's a lot more expensive than it used to be.
I moved to London at 20 and I couldn't afford to live in central London because my salary wouldn't have allowed me to do that, and that was all those years ago.
Well, now I wouldn't be able to afford to buy an outer London, right? So that's very different from when you arrived. Now,
well, you don't know where I lived.
In terms of your proposal, I think it's on the right track. I think it's very sort of smart to be thinking about these kind of things for two reasons. So one is sort of inequality in the society. And we talked about on a previous show, actually, how I think it was the IFS who found that social mobility is at an all-time low. And I think that is because people's
I don't agree.
People's wealth is so tied up in houses instead of their income for working. And I do think we need to redistribute between those who own property and those who haven't got on the property ladder. So it's very intelligent on that level. My worry with the capital gains tax is that it would discourage people from moving. So what we actually want is people who are in big houses, potentially they're an old couple and they're living in this huge house that a family could be living in. We kind of want them to sell up and downsize. Now, a capital gains tax would disincentivise them. So I think what we need is a property tax which you pay every year, and that would discourage people under-occupying big
Getting rid of stamp
houses.
duty would probably help people when it comes to getting bigger properties.
Yeah, well, there is an issue. So economists always sort of tear their hair out over this, whereby from an economics perspective, you don't want to tax transactions because you're in favour of transactions. What you actually want to tax is people sitting on property. But politically, it's very difficult to get people to pay a property tax every year because they see it as you know, this is my house, why should I pay a tax on it? So it's a really difficult political problem. But ultimately, I think what we need to move towards is, some kind of property tax which is paid every year, or at least you can just...
Oh, I can hear you.
Or you can just reform the council tax bands as well.
We don't want to give politicians any room
Don't give them any ideas.
Take any more tax off you. But you raise a good point. People living in properties. Now, where we know we do have a problem is people do buy up properties and they don't live in them. Do you see my point?
Yeah, well, the property tax would help with that, actually.
Well, no, but we don't
make it more expensive
I'm just
to sit
saying
on a
that
house.
there are a proportion where you could sort of look at something like that, which are left empty.
Right, well, there you go. We're going to carry that one over as well to another day. If I had £1 for every one of you that's written in, say, Michelle, no, we don't want more tax, we want less. Get rid of capital gains, get rid of inheritance tax. That's what you lot are saying to me. Roger that. Look, Michael, Jacqueline, that is pretty much all we have got time for. Thank you for your company. Do not go anywhere. Nigel Farage is up next. So make sure you have a good night. I was just about to say goodbye. My inbox is absolutely on fire. Is there anyone out there that agrees with that capital? No, I think no. OK, I'll take it as a no. Night. See you tomorrow.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkill and welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. We do have some further wet and perhaps thundery weather on the way with some strong winds too. The isobars are very tightly packed at the moment, which just illustrates that it is so blustery, so windy at the moment, and low pressure arriving, bringing some further wet weather to many parts as well. As we go through the end of today and overnight, we are going to have some heavy bursts of rain, particularly across parts of Scotland. There is a warning in force here, and also some further heavy rain for parts of Western England and Wales, also a warning in force here. Temperatures for many, well, it is going to be a mild start on Wednesday morning, though it may not feel it because of the unsettled weather. A band of rain then is going to push its way eastwards across parts of England and Wales in particular, with some heavy bursts as we go through the day, reaching parts of the southeast into the afternoon. Some brighter skies across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also a feed of showers coming in, and some of these could be heavy and thundery. Temperatures should just about get to highs of around 20 Celsius in the southeast, but in the wind and the rain, it's not going to feel as warm as that. That rain will eventually clear through as we go through Wednesday night into Thursday, so a brighter start for many places on Thursday. But again, we are going to see plenty of showers and also some heavy showery rain feeding into western parts of Scotland in particular, with the risk of some thunder. There will be some further unsettled weather through the end of the week, but perhaps something a bit drier to start Saturday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News.